I got some deletions to do, but I got something weird for you here. It was going to be either this, Imperial Governors and Strategos. I'm going to do Strategos first. It's two different games. They both use the same base rules. Imperial Governors is presented first. I'll talk a little bit about that. The other option was Victory Games Vietnam. I decided one way or another you were going to get a treaty. There's something you really, really want, as evidenced by over 100 votes, thumbs for it on my list, plus somebody dropped 100 geek gold on it for me. Yeah, but I did that and videoed it within the last decade. It's not available anymore, but okay, it will get done. It was really on my mind. I like to do a big game over the summer. Unfortunately, last year that was impossible. This year, I was kind of like, well, I mean, summer's done, man. I should at least squeeze it in while I got some good weather. But I promise you, I will try to get it done sometime in the near future, or one of the other big ones that people really love and really want to see played. However, after having done Pericles over there, yeah, I can't zoom, but way over there, I can walk now. I was kind of in the mood to take a look at this or some other game on the subject. Now, what's kind of interesting is this is actually about the only thing that was available on the subject matter in my era. There were some very, very abstracted things, and this is pretty abstract, but we'll get to it in a moment. And then if you're looking at Ancients, kind of strategic, obviously there's the Imperium Romanum flavor. This actually kind of is in competition with that in a sense, but at a lighter level. It also comes with the Imperial Governors game, which would seem to be something having to do with the Roman Empire, but no, it's something that has very little to do with history at all. This one, however, does seem to be based on history, and that's why I want to go with it first. I may do the other one. I may decide, screw it, because the Imperial Governors is actually, it's not even really a game. It's not a complete game. For example, it doesn't actually have victory conditions, or the implied victory conditions seem to be impossible to win, which are maybe you're supposed to wipe the other players out, or maybe just get them all to concede to you or something. I don't know. But there's no actual way to end the game. It will continue forever, and there's no stopping point, except there's suggestions of, well, play it for a time limit. Yeah, okay. Whatever. This one has victory conditions. I've never finished a game of it. However, I haven't played all the way through. What's kind of interesting about this is it actually kind of pleasantly surprised me, as opposed to Imperial Governors, which, seems like the cool one. It's got all these cards, event cards, bribes, diplomacy going on and everything. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out the game in it. And, well, at least the heart of it. I mean, I can figure out the system and everything. I just can't figure out, how you end it, which is kind of weird. But let's take a look at this one. I really never played it very much, but I ended up playing it with a buddy of mine back in Buffalo, and we were kind of impressed with how this one played out. Compare it to the other things that I know of the era. Pericles, obviously, I just played. Very, very abstract and has different kind of flavors to it. I played Mark Herman's Peloponnesian War, but I played it as the solitaire game. Solitaire games never really excite me too much. Someday I've got to try to play that as I don't know, it can hold up to 7 players or something, I think. Something crazy for what it is. You'd think it's a 3-player game, but I think it actually can hold more than that. But that has some weird mechanisms in it where you're no longer the side you thought you were because you're winning too much. Kind of a Churchillian flavor to that. Mothra. The other option I had was the Clash of Arms game, which is also kicking down there near Peloponnesian War. these stupid boxes, it's harder for me to shift things around. Not that it was ever easy, but it's hard for me to like stack things near where they belong and then eventually catch up and just do a massive shift. So we're going to have a little bit more chaos than I'm used to until I get some kind of shelving. Those probably should go over there. I just don't like them where they are. But anyway, that one I've never played. I've heard horrible things about it. I've seen an attempt to play it at Concept World Expo, and by someone who was giving it a real serious go, and printed out all the play aids and everything, and kind of walked away partway through with, it doesn't really work, which is pretty much what everybody says about it. I had to have it though, this one, however, it does kind of work. It may be a little too abstract, but let's take a look. First of all, it uses the same core rules as the Imperial Governors. I'll go over the rules in this, and then I'll probably, if I do Imperial Governors, I'll go over the differences. They reprint the rules twice in this rulebook. This is kind of a total off-brand game. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the components. You've got land units, which are termed legions in the other one, and naval units, and they have a strength value on them. You have leaders, who are nothing special here. These blank counters can be used as control markers, whatever. We've got fortifications, which show up. Pretty much the Athenians are the only ones who can build them. And then we have the map itself, which is a hex grid with areas divided into it. There's an economic value to the areas. There's these things, which are towns, and they have a defensive value printed on them. That's about it. Third record track. Political rules for this scenario, and the combat results table, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. There's something I like about that, which may be what differentiates this on the good side from Imperium Romanum, although it doesn't handle quite the same level of detail. Obviously, I got land, navy, the values here, these represent economic power, and there's land and naval economic value. And let's see, like, Athens here has a 1-7, Sparta has an 8-0, Sicily's a 5-5. Okay, I think that's about it. Okay, so you got different terrain types as well. You got normal clear terrain, which you can move through normally. You have sea terrain. You have crappy terrain, which you have to stop when you enter. You have seasonal terrain, which on the wrong turns you have to stop when you enter, but otherwise it's clear. And then you got the special Persian area, which I think no one can enter. Positive. Okay. The game is going to flow kind of strangely. So you have 2 pre-turn periods, and then you settle into the war itself. During the pre-turn periods, you're not going to be at war, but the 2 coalitions are going to expand and, form their basis, their core at that point before they clash. Okay. You will start with a pile of troops, 8 units, 8 strength points in both cases. For the Athenians, it's 7 navy, 1 land. For Sparta, it's 8 points of land units and 4 commanders. One of the key elements to this game is that you don't move anything without a commander. And at the beginning, you're going to wander around and try to convince other territories to join you. And that's actually a pretty simple thing. The sequence of play is pretty simple. First, you count up your revenue. You total it up, and then you pay, and this is something that's missing, in my opinion, from Imperium Romanum. You have to pay maintenance on your units. It was a pretty common idea in the strategic games, especially kind of ancient-y type things that were kind of abstracted. But for some reason, Imperium Romanum didn't have a you must pay for your units. They just had a you have to build your units. I think there were some units you had to pay maintenance on, but for the most part, other than keeping your units in supply, once you created army units, you never had to pay them anything. Well, in this, you have to pay for them. And you can build more units during your treasury phase. Then you're allowed to move your forces, and this is an I go, you go design. It's old. And then when you fight, okay, so it's got hidden stacks. You can't look at the opponent's stacks until you're in the same hex as them. If you want to attack them, you have to have 125% of their strength in order to fight them. If you don't, you fail to attack. It's that simple. If you do have it, you might wipe them out and take some losses. That's the way the combat results chart works. And we'll look at that briefly. So here, 125%. Well, you either get no effect or you destroy the defender. And the attacker takes some proportion of their force as a loss. Okay. And otherwise, there's no battle, essentially. Okay. And then the Athenians get to go after the Spartans. So land units can only move with a general. Same with sea units. You can carry them by sea. You can pick up land units, walk them to a boat, and set sail from the boat. In this particular scenario, as opposed to the governor's one, you can pretty much embark on a boat anywhere on a coast. I've already talked about the different terrains. If you're in poor terrain, if you move into a poor terrain spot, your movement stops. If you move into one of these when it's bad, your movement stops. Sea movement, your leaders have that 5 hex movement allowance. They can pick units up and walk with them. Each unit can only be carried by 1 leader in a given player turn. And, you know, the leader is the one with the movement point allowance. So if you walk to a boat and you only have 1 movement point left, you get on the boat, you sail out 1 hex. That's it. Nothing special. You can stay out at sea however long you like, whatever. Sicily's got special rules, though. In order to move here, you have to go to one of these arrows. And then I believe you go into the C spot. No, you go into the A spot. And then you go into the B spot for your next turn's movement, the C spot for your next turn's movement. You can't turn around or do anything. And then at the end of that, when you're in the C spot, you're allowed to enter the Sicily map from any of the hex sides. I would say any of the water hex sides, but they don't specify that. You could land there, I guess. Okay. When you're moving, if you have 5-to-1 odds or greater, when you move into an enemy hex, you find out how many troops there are, you can just declare they're destroyed and keep going, and it doesn't affect you. If you want to leave a hex that has a smaller hostile force, you can do so, but you can only leave through the hex side that you entered on unless you roll a die. If you want to roll a die for it, on a 1, 2, or 3, you can slip out a different hex side. Otherwise, you're stuck in that hex. If you want to leave a hex occupied by a numerically superior force, you have to roll the die no matter what. You can't just slip away. You can't back out of the hex, basically. Like I said, your stacks are hidden. The zone of control is really just the hex that you're in. There's no limit to stacking. Combat's pretty simple. Odds chart. 125, 150, 200%, 3, 4, 500%. Pretty simple. If you have combined forces, if you're in a coastal hex, land and naval units fight together. And you can attack naval units with land units. You can attack land units with naval units. Nothing complex there. And that represents all kind of weird stuff like Marines and all kind of stuff like that that were available. Not particularly realistic and detailed, but it catches some of the idea well enough. If you're out at sea, only your boats fight, and each strength point of boat can carry 1 strength point of land units. So if you lose some boats, you might have some guys drown. Cities and fortresses. Okay, if you attack a city or a fortress with units in it, it gets to add its strength to the units. and it just adds it. So like 1 unit would get the +3 strength from this space. Sparta and Athens have special rules. We'll get to them in a moment. If a general is alone, in this game, he will be executed, and you will get another replacement for him in the next year. In the Imperial Governors, there's all kind of ransoming rules and all kind of weird shit like that. None of which really sounds reasonable to me. I have tried it maybe once and was not impressed. Okay, you collect your revenue of the 2 different types. Okay, in order to control a space, though, you have to convince all of the cities in that region, and the regions are outlined with these little borders. You have to convince all the cities in that region to join you. The way you do this is by ending with a general on that city hex with a force at least equal to the printed value of the city. I haven't set up my troops yet. We'll get to that. It's going to be very hard, though, for Athens early in the game to get any land allies. Like, they're not going to get any in the first turn, for example. They can get naval allies, though. Okay. That city will remain yours until your opponent persuades it the same way. The colony, if it's empty. When you've gotten all the cities in a colony persuaded, the colony will start providing you revenue on your next game turn. If the owning player fails to maintain a garrison of at least 1 strength point in one of the region's cities, that region stops providing him income. If his opponent constructs a fortress within the colony, it'll not provide any income. If a hostile force takes one of the cities, either by combat or through persuasion against an unmanned city, then you're not going to get income from it. The only way you get income is if you own all the cities one way or another. At the start of each turn, you calculate the number of land revenue points from your home estate and controlled state. You add that to your balance, and then you're going to have to pay 1 treasury point of the appropriate type, land or naval, for each of your strength points. After you do that, you're allowed to build new strength points, and they cost you... Uh-oh. Yeah. They cost you 2 points each to build new units. If you want to disband units for some reason, it'll cost you 3 points to do so. But if you can't pay for units, they automatically disband, and there's no penalty for that. Fortresses. You can construct fortresses on a hostile coastal hex in order to deny someone revenue, and it also gives you a defensive location. To construct a fortress, you have a naval strength force of no less than 5 strength points landing on a coastal hex within the state at the end of the following friendly movement phase. If neither the naval force nor the general has moved or been attacked, you get to put a level 1 fortress in that hex. And then that fortress adds 1 to your defense strength, just like it's a city. On the next turn, if neither movement nor combat has occurred, you can replace the marker with a fortress value 2. I assume you have to keep a leader and 5 naval strength points for this to happen. At the end of the following turn, same conditions, you go up to fortress value 3. This is as good as a fortress can get. As soon as the fortress marker has been placed on the board, the owning player of that state can get no more revenue from it. Fortresses can only be constructed on mainland Greece south of Thessaly Epirus. Okay, so you cannot construct any in Attica. If you construct them in Laconia, they don't wipe out the entire income. They just take off 2 income each. At least that's how I read it. Maybe 2 income in addition to all your income from the city, but I don't think so. Okay. There are 4 colonies on Asia Minor here, 1, 2, 3, 4, that the Persians kind of consider their own. If either player goes into Asia Minor, there's a chance that they will cause the Persians to come in. If they do, what happens is at the start of game turn 4 in each year, those are kind of monthly turns, if you own any of the 4 states, a die is rolled and the Persian intervention table is consulted. Okay. If an R happens, there's going to be a chance of a revolt in each controlled state. A 4, 5, or 6 will be a revolt. The state reverts to its former neutral status, and all troops within it are destroyed. If an I happens, that's an intervention, and the Persian king will give a fleet to the controlling player's opponent. I don't know what that means. If both players have forces there, it's not covered in the rules. I would say Persia stays out of the war. What that is going to be is a 30 strength point fleet constructed on the opponent's coast. I don't know what that means. The opponent's coast. I assume over here. But maybe it's in Attica. I don't know. The rules for this are not well reviewed, as it were. But I would say it's probably over there. They don't have to be paid for. They don't require any maintenance. However, they will not be replaced by the Persian king. You use a different set of pieces for them. The intervention can only happen once to each player. Once it's happened, that player is immune from it ever again, but the other player could get affected by it. The Athenian harvest. If the Spartans are able to send a force of at least 4 strength points into Attica and be there on turn 6 of any given, not in the first 2 turns of the game, that they're not at war, then if they end on the hex containing the Athenian revenue point marker, I guess this hex right here, that's the only thing I can think of it, Sparta gets $10, and they can take that as land or sea or a mixture. Sicily. If you try to take control of Sicily, the Sicilians might enter the war on the other side. When you enter the Sicilian map, you roll a die. On a 1, 2, or 3, Sicily works just like normal. You can just persuade the cities. It doesn't put up any fight. On a 4 or 5, there's going to be 5 land and 5 sea points in Syracuse. They'll remain there. If you want to control Sicily, you have to beat them. And then on a 6, Sicily just joins the other side, and it'll be facing you, and its forces don't need to be paid for on the turn in which they're raised, but after that, they can actually come back and work their way back and start fighting on the main board even. The first 2 years of the game are a 16-year period. 16 game turns covering expansion periods A and B. 16 game turns, these 8. Yeah, so they're not actual. The time is abstracted on them. And the goal there is to expand your territory. The victory conditions to this are to defeat the enemy by capturing their home city. In order to take their home city, you have to besiege it for 3 consecutive turns. Athens requires 5 land and 5 sea strength points to besiege. Sparta requires at least 10 land strength points. The besieging force has to be accompanied constantly by a general. The siege can only be undertaken if the opponent has been deprived of control of all of his controlled states. You basically have to beat someone down completely to succeed at this. During the siege, the besieged player can only raise fresh troops should he wish to do so within his besieged capital. He gets less and less revenue as time goes on. Basically, if you're stripped to that point, you probably just want to quit the game. No reason to play it out, although it may take a while to actually finish. But I have the feeling if the game's balance ever shifts, it shifts massively and it snowballs in a horrible way. So, for example, the Sicilian expedition could quite reasonably end up tilting the game against Athens, and then boom, they lose. But they don't have to try. That's it. It's a fairly simple set of rules. It has a means of preventing either side from winning the game. It feels a little artificial, but I don't know, you know. Wow, this is one hell of a short intro. There's not a lot of rules to it, but we're going to give it a kick and see how it works. Like I said, I remember being kind of pleasantly surprised with how it played out, given how light it is. But we never finished it, so I don't know. And I'm pretty sure I never finished it solo. It wasn't something that I pulled out very often. The hideous appearance, oh man, these counters. I didn't even clip these suckers. They're side mounted. I think I tried to file them or something, but they really look hideous, and they're really, really glossy. And the color and everything, it's just horrible. But yeah, let's see how it plays.